Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.
Today we're plunging into something really provocative, a historical question. What if the story we've all known for like 2,000 years is missing a really crucial chapter?
It's a powerful starting point, isn't it?
It really is. Our sources today are digging into what they call a hidden truth, one that could fundamentally shift how we see early Christianity, the very foundations of faith.
It asks us to look beyond the standard narrative, to think about what might have been, well, deliberately hidden.
Exactly. So the core subject for this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
the possibility that Jesus of Nazareth had daughters, a bloodline. And that, according to the research we've gathered, this bloodline was systematically maybe suppressed by the early church.
Right. We've looked at a whole collection of sources, articles, historical analyses, research papers.
They're trying to piece together these whispers that history tried to silence. That's a quote from one of them.
It is. And our mission here, it isn't just about reporting some fringe theory.
Yeah.
Not at all. It's about pulling out the most important nuggets, the key ideas from these varied sources, helping you navigate what is, let's be honest, a complex and really intriguing alternative story.
We're focusing on the historical implications, those big what-ifs, offering a fresh look at what got remembered and maybe, more importantly, what might have been consciously erased.
So let's start right there
Yeah.
with that foundational idea from the sources. The story we have been told for nearly 2,000 years is incomplete.
Yeah, just pause and imagine that for a second. What if Christ's legacy wasn't just spiritual teachings? What if it was also a living biological bloodline? I mean, that changes everything.
It absolutely does. It forces you to consider a completely radical departure from the norm. And a key question that keeps coming up in these sources is, why daughters?
Mhm.
Why would daughters specifically be seen as such a unique threat?
That's interesting. Why daughters?
Well, in the ancient world, yeah, male heirs had obvious political clout. But a daughter, one analysis puts it like this: she was at once invisible and unstoppable.
Invisible and unstoppable.
Wow! Yeah. Her name might be erased from record, her face absent from chronicles, yet through her womb the line would continue unbroken. That biological reality, it made female heirs a kind of persistent challenge for any institution wanting total control over a lineage.
So, harder to control, harder to erase completely, a vulnerability.
Exactly. A profound vulnerability if you're trying to suppress something.
Okay, so how was this potential bloodline supposedly erased? The sources mention it wasn't just, violence, though I'm sure that was part of it.
Right. Violence played a role, undoubtedly. But the main tool, as highlighted again and again, was silence. One source says the most effective form of forgetting is not destruction, but omission.
Omission. So, leaving things out.
Precisely. Removing names from records,
Yeah.
just not telling certain stories, deliberately casting doubt on whether they could even be possible, until eventually people just forgot they might have existed.
That's actually kind of insidious and incredibly effective for rewriting history.
It really is.
Yeah.
It shows you how historical narratives aren't just passive records. They're active constructions. What's missing can sometimes tell you more than what's present.
Okay, and right at the center of this whole alternative story, our sources place Mary Magdalene, not just as a follower or even the repentant sinner image that came later, but as the absolute pivotal figure, the one who was potentially, quote, wife, mother, and bearer of a sacred bloodline.
That really flips the script on her traditional role, doesn't it?
Completely. Where does this idea even come from?
Well, a lot of it stems from those other Gospels, the apocryphal texts, the ones that were deliberately cast aside by the early church fathers when they were deciding what went into the Bible.
Right, the ones that didn't make the cut.
Exactly, like the Gospel of Philip. It actually describes Magdalene as the one whom Christ loved more than the others, the one he kissed often.
Kissed often. Okay, that's
Yeah.
suggestive.
It is. And it apparently caused real jealousy among the other apostles. It strongly hints at an intimacy that seems, well, deeper than just spiritual metaphor. It certainly challenges the later image of Christ's celibacy and the all-male leadership circle.
And didn't another gospel, the Gospel of Mary, show her in a position of authority?
Yes, that's another key piece cited in the sources. The Gospel of Mary presents her not just as a disciple, but as a teacher, someone with hidden wisdom, comforting and instructing the other disciples.
And Peter challenged her in that gospel, didn't he?
He did, which reveals a very different dynamic, possibly power struggles, hints of strong female leadership, a diversity of views that got kind of smoothed over later on.
So this powerful image of Magdalene, how did it get buried?
The sources really point a finger at Pope Gregory the Great back in the 6th century. His sermon was critical. He effectively recast Magdalene as a repentant prostitute.
Even though the Bible itself never says that.
Never. Not explicitly. But Gregory preached it. And that image, it just stuck. It became cemented in Christian tradition for centuries. And, crucially, it diminished her status. It buried her potential role as a partner, as a mother.
And it undermined her authority.
Yeah.
Made her seem like an unlikely person to carry any kind of sacred lineage.
Precisely. It was a very effective way to sideline her, historically speaking.
Okay, so if Magdalene was this important, and if there was a bloodline, why would the early church go to such extreme lengths to suppress it? It can't just be about one family, can it?
No, it's much bigger than that. The core insight from the sources is this. A living heir would not need the permission of Rome to claim authority.
Ah, okay, that's the key.
That's the absolute crux of it. Think about it. A direct, living descendant of Christ. They wouldn't need priests or bishops or even the Pope to validate their connection to the divine.
It completely bypasses the whole church hierarchy.
Exactly. It challenges the church's exclusive claim to divine authority, its monopoly on grace, its whole structure. It's an alternative source of legitimacy, a direct, undeniable threat to institutional power, something that simply couldn't be allowed.
Wow. So if Jesus had daughters, their very existence would have fundamentally undermined the church as it was forming.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the Holy Grail. The sources have a pretty radical take on this.
They really do. It's fascinating. The argument is that the true Holy Grail was never a chalice of gold, but a bloodline of daughters.
Not a cup, but people.
People. Specifically, the female line carrying the sacred blood. And they point to the language.
The language.
Yeah, the term sang real, which we translate as Holy Grail. The sources argue it was originally saying royal.
Saying royal.
Royal blood.
Royal blood. So the whole quest for the Grail, it transforms. It's not about finding an object. It's about searching for a family, a line of descent so carefully hidden that only symbols could reveal it.
That puts a whole new spin on King Arthur and all those stories. It really does. It suggests powerful myths can be used to encode or hide truths. Makes you look beyond the literal, doesn't it?
Definitely. So, okay, a hidden family, royal blood. If they existed and things got dangerous in the Holy Land, where did they go? How is the line preserved?
This is where you get into these really strong legends, particularly tied to southern France. The sources detail accounts suggesting Mary Magdalene and her children were smuggled away from the Holy Land.
Smuggled away.
Yeah, across the Mediterranean, ending up on the rugged shores of southern Gaul, specifically areas like Provence or Occitania.
Modern-day France.
Right. And the legends of her presence there are incredibly persistent. Local stories tell of her living in caves, like Saint Baume.
I've heard of that cave.
And arriving by boat at a place now called Sainte-Marie-de-Mer. And sometimes the legends explicitly mention her arriving with children.
So this exile wasn't just running away, it was maybe a conscious act of preservation.
That's how the sources frame it, a way to keep the line safe. It also highlights how local folklore can sometimes hold on to histories that the official records discard.
But if the written history was being suppressed, maybe even actively destroyed, how does that memory survive for centuries? How do these whispers get passed down?
That's a great question. And the sources suggest it was done very cleverly, hidden in plain sight almost.
How so?
Well, one intriguing element is the phenomenon of the Black Madonnas, found all over Provence and other parts of Europe.
The dark-skinned statues of Mary and Jesus.
Exactly. These mysterious statues. Some interpretations presented in our sources see them as veiled representations of Magdalene as the mother figure, embodying the sacred feminine, a hidden lineage, a different kind of power.
So a way to venerate her without explicitly challenging the church.
Potentially. And it wasn't just statues. Think about symbols in art and architecture, things like roses and chalices.
You see those everywhere in medieval stuff.
Right. They recur constantly in art, buildings, even noble family crests. The sources argue these weren't just decorative. The rose symbolized secrecy, the feminine, the chalice represented the womb, the vessel of life.
The vessel, like the Grail, but meaning the womb.
Exactly.
Right.
And putting them together, the rose and chalice is seen as a code, a signal for saying royal, the royal bloodlines, like a secret language embedded in the culture.
Wow. Transforming everyday symbols into a hidden archive. So were there actual groups guarding this secret, this lineage?
The sources identify several potential candidates over the centuries. Early on, there's talk of the Merovingian kings of the Franks.
The long-haired kings, right, 5th to 8th century.
They're presented as a strong possibility for being a kind of hidden Christic dynasty. Our sources talk about their mystical aura, their supposed healing powers.
And they resisted Rome's authority too, didn't they?
They did, which is seen as a key indicator. It supports the idea they might have been connected to this hidden bloodline, deriving their authority from somewhere else, not from the church. An older, more direct claim.
Okay, so the Merovingians early on. Who came later?
Fast forward a few centuries to the 12th and 13th. You get the Cathars in Occitania, southern France again.
Ah, the Cathars. Known for revering Mary Magdalene and definitely defying Rome.
Very much so. The sources strongly suggest they were conscious guardians of this bloodline knowledge, maybe even the lineage itself. And this casts the Albigensian Crusade in a new light.
The brutal crusade against them.
Yes, often portrayed as just stamping out heresy, right? But these sources propose it was something more sinister, a targeted campaign to erase a memory too dangerous for Rome.
To wipe out the guardians and the secret they held.
That's the implication, especially when you look at the fall of Montsegur, their last fortress, in 1244. There are legends that a great treasure was smuggled out just before it fell.
And the treasure wasn't gold, maybe.
Maybe it was the lineage itself, or proof of it. It really makes you question the official reasons given for such intense, brutal suppression. What was Rome really afraid of?
It's chilling. So the lineage had early protectors. Did this guardianship continue? Where do the sources trace it next? It feels like the Knights Templar have to come into this somewhere.
Oh, they absolutely do. The Templars are a huge part of this narrative.
Their sudden wealth and power.
Exactly. Where did it come from? The conventional answers are banking, donations, spoils from the Crusades. But the theory explored in our sources is far more dramatic.
Go on.
It suggests their power stemmed from discovering something incredible under the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. Perhaps proof of Christ's bloodline, or maybe even its living heirs.
Wow. Okay, that would explain a lot.
It would.
Yeah.
And it also provides a different motive for their sudden, brutal suppression in the early 14th century. It wasn't just about King Philip of France wanting their money or the Pope feeling threatened by their power.
It was about silencing them because they knew too much.
That's the idea, that they were custodians of a forbidden legacy. And Rome couldn't allow that knowledge, or perhaps the lineage itself, to continue under their protection.
And those legends about Templars escaping before the arrests, taking treasures with them.
Could that treasure have been the Grail, meaning the bloodline, smuggled away yet again? It fits the pattern.
It's amazing how these threads connect across centuries. So after the Templars were crushed, did the secret just vanish?
Not according to these sources. The suggestion is that the Templar legacy and the guardianship of this secret kind of flowed into other groups. Hidden brotherhoods.
Like who?
Groups like the Rosicrucians, maybe the Freemasons. Societies known for their secrecy and symbolism.
Ah, right, with the roses and chalices and hidden genealogies.
Exactly. Our sources describe how these societies carried forward symbols that echo all those ancient whispers, often cloaking the knowledge in layers of allegory and ritual. It's like a continuous, hidden stream of information.
A remarkable effort to keep something alive against overwhelming opposition.
It really is. It shows this powerful human drive to protect and pass on knowledge deemed too dangerous for the mainstream.
And then, more recently, all these threads seem to converge on one specific, very weird little place, Rennes-le-Château.
Yes, that village in southern France again. It's presented in our sources as almost a modern focal point for all these lingering whispers.
Because of that priest, Berenger Saunier, and his mysterious wealth in the late 1800s.
Precisely. The theory explored is that Saunier stumbled upon something huge, maybe proof of Christ's descendants, or some related secret connected to the Cathars or Templars in the area.
And instead of revealing it, he encoded it.
That's the idea, that he hid clues in the strange renovations he made to his church. The weird symbols, the odd statues, the inscriptions. They're seen as deliberate pointers for those who understand the code. It almost invites you to become a historical detective.
Okay, so we've got layers of history, suppression, secret societies, coded messages. But what about the evidence of absence? The things that aren't there? Our sources talk about Vatican silence and the fires of the Inquisition.
Yes, these are presented as powerful, albeit negative forms of evidence. Think about the Vatican. Its vast archives, much of it completely secret, and its official silence on matters like these.
The silence is telling.
The sources pose the question, if Christ's bloodline existed, If Magdalene's daughters left even the faintest record, might it not be here buried beneath layers of secrecy? The argument is that the Church actively curated memory, canonizing some texts, banning others like the Gnostic Gospels.
So the very lack of official records, given the Church's role as historian, could be seen as a sign of deliberate removal. Inverse proof.
That's the suggestion. History is shaped just as much by what's excluded or destroyed as by what's preserved and included.
And that deliberate silence, it's paired with something much more active and brutal, the Inquisition.
Right. Starting around the 12th century, its mission was officially to hunt out heresy. But some sources reframe this, suggesting it might also have been hunting blood.
Hunting the actual descendants, the hidden daughters of Christ.
That's the provocative theory. Why else, the sources ask, was there such ferocity? Why the burning of libraries, the destruction of manuscripts, the utter annihilation of communities, like the Cathars, who spoke reverently of Magdalene or seemed interested in unusual genealogies?
It seems like overkill for just theological disagreements.
It suggests a deeper threat was perceived, a tangible threat to the Church's power structure, something physical, like a bloodline that had to be completely eradicated. The sheer scale of the suppression points to something incredibly significant being hidden.
Which brings us back to that recurring idea you mentioned earlier, the silence itself as proof.
Exactly. It's woven throughout the sources. The greatest proof of all lies in the persistence of silence. For if there was nothing to hide, why such effort to erase? Why such fury, such fire, such centuries of suppression?
The very intensity of the cover-up becomes the evidence.
It's a powerful argument, a testament to the significance of absence, like a ghost in the historical record pointing to a truth that just couldn't be allowed to surface.
Wow. So we have really covered a lot of ground today, following these whispers of Christ's hidden daughters, exploring all these different threads from the sources.
We have. From Mary Magdalene's potential true role to that radical rethink of the Holy Grail.
The legends of exile in France, the hidden symbols in art.
And the actions of guardians, like the Merovingians, the Cathars, the Templars, and then the suppressors, the silence, the fire.
It's an incredible alternative narrative. It certainly challenges you to think differently about how history gets written and by whom.
What's really striking is how these disparate pieces, legends, symbols, historical events, suppressed texts, how they all seem to weave together into this coherent, if controversial, story. It forces you to look beneath the surface of the official accounts.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to chew on drawn from the material. Maybe thinking about the Daughters of Christ isn't really about tracking down a literal genealogy today. Maybe it's more about memory, less about blood perhaps, and more about possibility.
That's a great way to put it.
They become a symbol, don't they? A symbol of everything that was hidden, everything that was feared by institutions seeking control. They represent the silence that, in the end, speaks louder than any official decree. So even if we can never know the definitive truth, the fact that this story, this alternative narrative, has somehow survived, it's like an unbroken thread weaving through all those centuries of suppression. And it really dares us to ask, doesn't it? What other histories, what other truths are still out there waiting beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed?
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.